Good evening, everyone. I'm thrilled to see how many people have come to this great meetup in a very short notice. You may ask yourself, who am I and what am I doing here? I'm not part of Zencity staff. I'm not Abhi Nemani, obviously. So my name is Noga Kapp. I'm managing partner of i3 Equity Partners. And we are actually the cause, or the root cause, if you like, of this meetup by actually being the first investor of Zencity after a very long chasing process. But we've been lucky to invest in this unbelievable team. And I would like to take this opportunity and explain a little bit about i3 Equity Partners for those entrepreneurs in the crowd. We are an early stage fund investing in IoT themes, including smart city, of course, any data-driven AI initiatives. That's our address. We are agnostic to verticals, although smart city is one of the more interesting one for us. And the most important uniqueness about ourselves is the fact that we are invested by large multinational corporates, such as GE, Microsoft, Qualcomm, Tata, and others. And our aim or goal is actually to connect in a very soft manner between the startups that we invest in and the large corporate, which is usually very difficult to swallow for a very small startup. And as a very interesting case, Zencity is really a fantastic use case because we invested, I think, in Zencity about a little more than a year ago, 15 months ago. And eventually, after a very long and hard work by the company, a little bit by us, we've managed to make a very strong linkage between the company and Microsoft. That's one of our partners, which led to an A round, a very successful A round that happened 9 months before we actually expected it. So that was a fantastic result and a closure of our theme. We have 5 investments to date. We are only 2 years on the road. And we're looking for more initiatives such as Zencity with top-notch talents. Hopefully all of you are like that. To come to us and talk to us whenever you like an advice or connection to us and to the multinational corporates. So without further ado, most importantly, we have an exciting evening tonight. I would like to invite Eyal Feder, the CEO and founder of Zencity, to introduce our great guest. And thank you all. Good evening.
Thank you so much, Noga, for the kind words and for all the support. Good evening, everybody. It's really, really exciting to see the packed room of people that came out on a Monday to talk about data in cities. I'm really happy that all of you are as geeky as I am. So my name is Eyal, and I'm proud to be the CEO of a company called Zencity. And I want to take just a couple of minutes to share a little bit about us. Zencity is a startup that's a little bit under 3 years old today. And what we do is we work with cities, with local governments, to help them understand their community, their residents, the people living in cities on a wide scale. If any of you are working in cities, working with cities, and I saw some of our great partners here in the audience, so thank you for coming. If any of you are working with cities, you know that the most important thing to the public servants running our cities is the feedback of their community. What our elected officials and what our civil servants in the city's management are trying to do with all of the money that they spend, with all of the actions that they take with their hard work, is they're trying to make, be careful, they're trying to optimize our satisfaction with life in the city. They're trying to make sure that we as a community are having the best experience that we can as a city. And so far, it's been very hard for them to measure how successful they are. They've been trying to do phone surveys, call people up. I don't know if anybody here ever got a survey from their city over the phone. I'm not talking about election surveys, like how clean is your city? That happen? 5 points to Inbal there in the back. Thanks for raising your hand. I don't know her, by the way. So they've been using tools like phone surveys. They've been using tools like town hall meetings. All these tools were there to help them measure what their community thinks, what their community is doing. But all these tools are limited because they suffer from the fact that people need to opt in, and the fact that they're non-real time, and the fact that only a very small portion of the community participates in them, hundreds of people at the best. Our company's goal is to help cities track the opinions, the priorities, the sentiment of their community on a city scale. We do that by taking data from a variety of sources: Facebook, Twitter, 106 or 311 in the US, wherever people are talking about the city, and we analyze it with a few algorithms that we developed to turn that into a score and show the city how it's doing. The city then uses that to direct their investment, their efforts into the things that matter most to their community. I'm happy to say that today we're working with about 30, a little bit over 30 communities in Israel and in the US. Great cities like Haifa, for example, Tel Aviv, Beersheba, Ashdod, and many others in Israel, and cities like San Antonio, Fort Lauderdale, and Arlington, and San Francisco in the US. The reason I'm telling you all of that is A, because you came to my event, so now you have to listen to me. But B, because as Noga said, we've recently raised our A round, and that means that we're growing our team. We're hiring for almost all positions in the company. So whether you're a developer, a data scientist, an analyst, a salesperson, a marketing person, wherever you are, we're looking for you. And we're very nice people. You can meet all of our team walking around here today. And if you're interested, you should especially meet Yael, who's here somewhere. Yael, who gave you free drink tickets outside, so you already like her. Or Amit, who's over here in the corner, and talk to them about how much, hopefully, you're interested in this opportunity. So that's a little bit about us, and thank you for listening. And I want to take the next couple of minutes to introduce our very exciting guest tonight, who's even more exciting than what I've told you so far. So Abhi is a year younger than me. And at that time, he's already done a few really, really, really cool things. Straight out of college, he joined Code for America, which, if you don't know, is probably the coolest civic tech organization out there. It's an organization that works with communities, with local governments, to help create digital platforms that help get access to data, get better services, and all that through volunteer work and through work of activists and civil servants. He did that straight out of college. He was co-director of that organization. And from there, he went on to the city of LA. As Mayor Garcetti was elected, he joined the city as the first chief data officer and built most of the city's open data infrastructure and internal dashboarding and reporting infrastructure based on data, helping the city make data-driven decisions. After that, he also had time to be the interim chief data officer for Sacramento and to do many, many cool things with GovTech startups in the University of Chicago and in many other places over the last few years. So without further ado, Abhi, have a great evening.
Apparently, he's really good at lying. Anyone who knows him? Thank you guys for coming. You guys having a good time so far? Yeah. Good free beer? Yeah? Well, can we start? Can I just tell you guys a secret? Is that okay? Can you promise not to tell any of my friends in the other cities that I worked in something? So I worked in like 100 different other cities in different ways. Never have I seen a meetup organized within a week that had 500 plus people interested and 150 plus people show up. So you guys are awesome. Tel Aviv might be the most engaged city I've ever been to. So awesome on you guys. All right, so I'm gonna try not to bore you that much so you can still enjoy your beer and try to talk to you a little bit about what I think about government, what I think about technology, and what I think about cities. Is that cool? So part of what I didn't tell you is that before doing all of this other stuff, I worked at Google for a little while. And one of the things I did there was marketing. And one of the interesting marketing projects we worked on was an ad that I want to show you. Is that okay? Can I show you this ad? I have to put the mic up to here. Can you hear that? So what struck me about that ad, what I liked about it, I didn't do a lot of the work. I was an intern, so I can't take really any credit for it, was that for the bulk of the ad, until the very, very end, you didn't see the product name whatsoever. You just saw what the products did, right? You saw their outcome, how it helped people, how it helped you, right? And more importantly, you saw that line. The web is what you make of it. And to me, that was really compelling. The web is what you make of it. And that's what I wanted to talk to you about today. Like, what does that mean, the web is what you make of it? So to talk to you about that, we have to step into what's called the Wayback Machine. Have any of you ever gone to archive.org, the Internet Archive, to see old school web pages? So let's take a look at some old ones, all right? You guys remember this? I don't know if you guys had like the CD-ROM discs that they'd put everywhere from AOL. Did you guys use them as Frisbees? Yeah, did that all the time. Favorite thing as a kid. This is the old school Yahoo. Yeah. I don't know if I'm saying Yahoo correctly, by the way, but that's how I say it. This is Britannica.com. Oh, and this is my personal favorite. This is the original WhiteHouse.gov from the US. But what was fascinating, so back then, at that point, government websites, like WhiteHouse.gov, that's not on this list, but government websites that look just like that were considered some of the best websites out there. Time ranked 3 government websites in their top 10 websites in 2003. Would any of you think that would be the case today? And listen, I built many government websites, and I wouldn't say that. Right? But then things changed, right? So you wouldn't see that now anymore. And why did things change? To me, I have a pretty quick and simple answer. See, I was worried no one would get this, because I call these lolcats, but apparently some people don't know these are lolcats. But you know, people started generating stuff on the internet. The internet changed. It became more active. People started creating things themselves on the internet. YouTube came out, right? People started generating their own videos, right? This was the original Facebook. People started adding their own content to social media. Wikipedia came out, and we started creating our own Britannica.com that people actually liked and used. And so if you compare the top websites in the US from 2003 to 2013, look at all the new websites that are there that weren't there beforehand. Facebook, YouTube, Amazon, Wikipedia, LinkedIn, Twitter, and Craigslist. What do they all have that are part of them that are different? They all are fundamentally platform-based, right? They're all that people talk to each other and do things with each other, which is what you couldn't do that much in 2003. So what I'm trying to explain here is that the web changed. The reason the web is what we can make of it now is because the web went from being passive to being active. And this is what my friend Tim O'Reilly describes as the transition from Web 1.0 to Web 2.0. And here are some examples of other ways that happened, kind of namely, and these are dated a bit. This was an old paper. But like, we went from mp3.com to Napster, from personal websites to blogging, publishing to participation, content management to wikis. Things changed. And what I describe this as is the web started to cultivate an architecture of participation. We developed the web with an architecture that people could engage with it. And that's what made the web more fun. That's why we go look for funny cat videos. At least I do. Does any of you guys know? Just me? Right? That's why we go and spend way too much time on Facebook, which I'm told in Israel is a big thing, so don't tell me you don't do that, okay? Right? The web changed, and it became something that we could make of it. And what I wanted to talk to you about today, as a government geek, as a guy who's spent too much time in public service and cares a little bit too much about democracy, is how we can take that same thinking of how we made the web more participatory and do that for government. how that's already happening, how you can take advantage of that, and what would that mean for you all as residents of Tel Aviv, as entrepreneurs, as developers, as whatever you do, and how that might make your place, the city that you love, even better. Is that cool? All right. So first things first is open data. Ido, who's IL's partner, told me I have to talk about this, so I'm doing what Ido says. Once you meet Ido, you'll know that you have to do what he says, so doing that. So open data, if you've not heard of the term, basically it means information that the government collects being made publicly available. And when you think about government making itself participatory, this is probably the most clear and obvious way that it can do that. And here's a picture of data.gov, which is the White House, the US government's main clearinghouse for all the US government's data. There's over 1.5 million data sets published here. What this means is all the stuff that the government has about all of, well, my country's people that used to be locked away is now available for everyone to do interesting things with. Huh? Okay, not that. Like do interesting things like, say, one big thing that's come out of this, the reason we have GPS data that you can track where your car is because government made that open data. The reason that weather data is available in 1 billion different applications is because government made that open data. So there's huge advantages for governments making their data openly available. And this has been historically happening at a federal level. And what made me excited when I started working at the local level was thinking about what could we do with this at the local level. And when Mayor Garcetti asked me to join the city of Los Angeles, he said, Abhi, I want you to do this for us really well. I want you to make sure we're the best open data city in the country. So what did I do as like a good web designer? I took our shitty government website and made it pretty. It's kind of pretty. No? No one thinks that's pretty? That hurts. Can I get you guys another drink? Okay? Can I do that? On me, not Zencity. Okay? No? Okay. Made it pretty. And so soon thereafter, Los Angeles was ranked the #1 open data city in the country. But the point I'm trying to make here is the reason that happened was not because we just made the website prettier. It was because we changed the way government approached how it uses its data, how it makes that data available, and how it engages with its citizens with that data. And that's what I want to explain as, oh, sure, I can take questions.
What is the motivation behind this change in the government? Are they feeling that people will immigrate to a different city, that business will move? What drives the decision?
Ah, great question. So the first thing is, how do you realize the promise of open data? First is you have to show value. And let me explain how we did this in Los Angeles, because this is exactly a great question, right? Because you can tell someone that open data matters, but as I know some folks I talk to work in government, but it's a scary thing to do, right? And you could, as some entrepreneurs here might know, if you've like gone to government and said, hey, I want your data, the governments will say, screw you, right? So it's a tricky thing of figuring out how you make sure you actually can get that data from the government, right? Yeah, right? Exactly, right? So I'm going to give you 2 ways of that. One is from the inside, and the other is from the outside, okay? So the first is how I did it from the inside, okay? So when I was working for the city of Los Angeles, about 6 months into it, this is right before the holiday season, the chief of staff knocks on my door, and she says, hey, Abhi, you know how to build websites, right? And I was like, yeah, I'm your chief data officer. That's kind of what you hired me for. Like, she's like, cool. Well, I need you to build a dashboard for the mayor. I'm like, oh, great. All right, let me think about that. And she's like, oh, here's the dashboard we have already. It's that. That's like a great dashboard, right, guys?
Very direct.
Right? Like, the Excel work on this is solid. And there's actually 3 more pages just like that she handed me. And she's like, all right, well, I need you to take this and make it like an interactive mobile website that he can use. And I'm like, okay. And I said, well, all right, as a proper engineer, give me like 2 months. I'll do some research, build a prototype, do some testing, get something out there, figure, you know. And she's like, well, I need it in 4 days. Again, this was during the holidays. And I was like, what the hell? And she's like, well, the mayor has promised that he's going to demo this at the US Conference of Mayors, which is the biggest conference for mayors in the United States. And he's giving the keynote address. And I'm like, you had him promise he's going to demo this piece of paper at the conference? And she's like, no, he's going to demo your app. I'm sorry, the app you just told me about? She's like, yeah, it'll be fine, right? I'm like, yes, boss? So fortunately, I relied on like open source tools and like building, as you guys may know if you're engineers, building like simple visualizations isn't the most complicated thing in the world, right? And one thing I'll just call out for anyone thinking about working with or for government, oftentimes simple stuff is easy to do and what government needs the most. And so all I did, you can see here, was built like simple D3 visualizations, a CutterDB map, and like some very simple JavaScript-based what I call data cards, right? Not the most complicated thing in the world. But here's the thing, it knocked their socks off. I was like their hero. The funny thing is I showed it to the mayor 2 days later, and I said, give me another 2 days before you show this thing. The mayor, I get a call from the LA Times the next day, even before the US Conference of Mayors event. LA Times was like, oh, the mayor just showed us your dashboard. Can you explain how you built it? Yeah. Government stuff is fun. Really fun. But the reason, to answer your question, sir. So he ended up showing this at the US Conference of Mayors. Fun other fact about this is he decided to demo it from his phone. Turns out I bought $300 worth of adapters because I don't trust live demos for anything, particularly from Androids. Sorry. And turns out his didn't work that day. I brought an adapter for my phone, and we had to use my phone. And I had to leave the Wi-Fi and cellular on, right, because it's a live demo. And I come from a large Indian family. I have 3 sisters. And guess what they like to do? They like to text all day long. So during the middle of his presentation, I'm so proud of you, son. And I'm sitting behind stage. No idea what's going on, just hear a roar from outside. Yeah, that was a special day for me. So this is, again, the sacrifice you put in for love of your city, right? But it worked out. We got a bunch of national press for it. Like 50 other cities, because I built the whole thing open source, signed up saying they wanted the same thing. And what was cool about it is he liked it so much, he came back to me saying he wanted more on that dashboard. And I said, sure, but the only way I can do that is if I have more data, right? And he's like, all right, sure, tell me who to call. So I'm like, this department, that department, this department, that department, right? So the point here is, by showing value to key decision makers, for instance, the mayor, right, or city manager, or whoever, solving real problems they have, or making them just look really good on stage while making yourself look really bad, you can really get traction to make things open up. Does that make sense? All right, so that's how you do it from the inside, right? And embarrass yourself. Here's how you do it from the outside. This is a picture of the Chicago Hack Night. I now live in Chicago, so I'm a little biased. I love these guys. Every Wednesday, these guys come together, these people come together, and they just spend their Wednesday evening building stuff on whatever open data they can find from the city. They started before the city had an open data program. They just started scraping data from the city, trying to build interesting stuff. And then eventually, the city government took notice and was like, whoa, this is cool. one of the first things they built was this, clear streets. One big challenge in St. Louis, which I'm guessing isn't a problem in Tel Aviv because I've been sweating the entire time I'm here, is it snows a lot, or sorry, in Chicago, is that it snows a lot. And people wanted to know when people were going to come and clear the streets of snow. And so these guys scraped all the data from the city website of the snow shoveling schedule and built this application. And the city had been getting so many phone calls asking about that same question, the city started linking to this website, right? So the city got bought in and then actually provided them just a data feed to that data, so they didn't have to keep scraping it. Another thing that happened is this program called large lots. So Chicago has a lot of vacant lots in the city, so places that aren't being used by anyone. And so they started a program where they would sell them to anyone for $1. They had about 10 people a month applying for this program, which, as someone who lives in Chicago, that's shocking, because I would buy a lot in Chicago for $10 instead of paying the rent that I'm paying right now, very happily. But I just didn't know about the program, right? Which is probably true for a lot of government programs, right? People just don't know about them because it's like hidden on a government website, if anything, or it's being sent out in a mailer, and who checks their mail anymore? So these things are hidden. These guys found the program, and then one step further, found all the vacant lot data hidden on some old GIS website, built this really nice tool, got people excited about the program, just had people initially, before the city was interested, say, hey, I would be interested in this program, got thousands of people to say, I would be interested in this program, took that back to the city, and the city's like, whoa, that's awesome. And the city actually let them build a form for people to fully apply for the lots on this website. And now Chicago has, I've been gone from LA for 3 years, so I can say this comfortably. Chicago now has the best open data program in the country. So there is a way to do this from the outside as well. But you have to find specific problems, do the hard work of getting the data, building the prototypes, and then talking to the right people. Does that make sense? Thank you for teeing up that whole portion of the talk, though. That was nice. I appreciate it. I'll buy you a beer right after. All right, so the second thing you have to do to make this thing work is create a sense of community. And I kind of talked about this with the Shy Hack Night thing, is you have to get people starting to talk to each other organically, right? It can't just be a one-off thing. Like, I'm sure you guys might have gone to like a hackathon before or an app contest before. Those are fun and exciting, but turns out, as you probably know, what you build from those things don't really sustain themselves over time. If you're going to build something that sustains itself over time, you have to build a team. And to build a team, you need to have a community of people working together over time. And the best way to do that is to have a community with a common identity that you're proud of. So like, I used to run Hack for LA, and we had this like cool logo, and like we made t-shirts and hats and stuff. I didn't wear hats, but like hats that other people wore, like, and stuff like that, that made people excited to be part of the community, right? So I would say if you're thinking about doing a similar thing here, is you have to focus on building a community and building a brand around it. And then the final thing here is, to really make this stuff work, is you've got to find money to back it, right? Which is why I was happy to hear about the i3 Ventures. Like, in the US, and like I'll tell you what we did in LA and Sacramento, is we found real capital that would fund open data projects that had legs to make them into sustainable companies or organizations. So in Los Angeles, we had the Goldhurst Foundation that would actually fund the apps that were built into nonprofits that would be able to sustain and scale that technology. In Sacramento, we built a fund, a $10 million innovation fund from the city government that would actually do that work from the city government side. Smart Chicago is a nonprofit in Chicago that does similar work. And then when I was at Code for America, we built a GovTech fund, which is a venture capital fund now on its second round, about $22 million, that invests in later stage, about Series A, GovTech companies and helps them get to scale. But without that, then whatever you build kind of ends up just sitting there on the shelf. I'll be honest, guys. Like, as I mentioned, I used to run Code for America. For the 4 years I was there, we built roughly 190 applications. 190. 15 of them became sustainable and scalable because we didn't have those ingredients I just mentioned, right? So what I just described came from a lot of time, energy, and experience. All right. The last thing I'll just say is the reason building a company out of this matters is because this is happening. People are building companies off open data. Zencity is a good example of that. Like, people are making this happen. This is an index put by my friends at the GovLab Institute in New York of just 500 companies, and there's even more in the US, that are building companies specifically off of open data. And do you know why? Because the economic value of open data, according to McKinsey, $3 billion. Oh, wait, sorry. $3 trillion. So this isn't a small market, right? This isn't small ball. This is serious business opportunity. And so what I just want to say is open data is your opportunity to build an app, company, and a city that you can be proud of. Or join a company that you can be proud of, like Zencity. I have to say that. Also, I believe it, so you should totally talk to Ayal and Ito after this, because they do good work. But there are really great companies doing this work, and I think it is a vitally important field. All right, so that concludes the open data chapter of this lecture. Yeah.
What do you mean by value exactly? Like the amount of stuff about
Economic value, so the valuation of the companies doing work in the space. I can send you the McKinsey report if you want to after this. Yeah. I almost worked there, but didn't do it. Who would work for McKinsey? I mean, I hope no one here does.
Not that there's anything wrong with it.
Yeah, no, of course, McKinsey's great. This is being recorded. God damn it. All right. All right, second thing is, so once you start opening up data and governments start understanding data, cool other things start to happen, right? Governments start to think differently, right? They start to act in other ways. They start to, in my case, I think they start to act like a platform. What do I mean by that? So look at this picture. You might have seen this before. This is a picture from the Vatican in 2005, and then 2013. Anyone notice what's different? There's a couple of these out there, right? And so what does that make when you guys, some of you guys are technologists, right? Or many of you guys, right? So a lot of people in technology for the last couple of years, right, think that the main thing to focus on is building the next great app. And I can't tell you the number of governments that have come to me for the last 8 years asking for exactly that. Abhi, build me a great mobile native application where my citizens can look at the updates from my mayor, pictures of our government staff, and tour City Hall. How many of you guys would ever do that? Yeah. Or download this app where they can send us specific messages about what they want their city to look like. So people, governments in particular, have always been keen, in my experience, on building these native applications or applications themselves that people will use. And frankly, it's not just governments in my experience, but in particular, I've seen that with governments. And what I always tell them is this. Based on a study I read just last year, the app economy is a winner-takes-all game. This was published in TechCrunch. Again, I'm happy to send the article to anyone else after this. What the long and short of it is, based on the study, most applications you download, by most, they say 87%, are opened only once after download, right? So you download them, open them once, and then never again, which kind of makes sense, right? You guys, honestly, today, what have you opened? Like Gmail, Twitter, Facebook, maybe Tinder, like, you know, like that's about it. Maybe Slack, but you can lie and say, sure, right? But like, people don't open most of the apps they download. So my recommendations to governments have now always become, try not to build something new, and try to go where people are already. And some of the best companies doing GovTech work, including Zencity, focus on that. And there's a cool example of how we did that with some cities in the US. So this is a story published in The Atlantic of how Yelp might clean up the restaurant industry. So when I was working at Code for America, we got approached by some cities saying, hey, we've got all this health inspection data, but no one's looking at it. So just for instance, I cut that picture. Do you guys have health inspection scores here? Like A, B, C, D? What is it like? Okay, I should have found that out before I told you the story. But hey, now you can push your cities to do that. So I'll explain how this works. So in the States, cities and counties go to every restaurant, do these inspections, and then they issue these scores to restaurants, A, B, C, or D, and then the restaurants are supposed to post these inspection scores in the front of the restaurant. What ends up really happening is they post them like in the back, near the restaurant, near the restroom that's like broken, so you can never see them, right? And so our idea was like, that's ridiculous, because you don't want to get that information after you sat down and are trying to use the restroom, right? You want to get that information before you choose which restaurant to go to, right? So we had the thought, how about instead of that information hidden in the back of the restaurant, how about instead you put it in the palm of your hand? So we partnered with a bunch of cities and decided to work with Yelp, or I know TripAdvisor is more popular here, right? To put that data front and center on Yelp. And so we set up a data standard among 25 different cities across the country around how that data should be presented, got Yelp on board, and then now they publish not just the score, but all the different violations, the reasons for that score. So you can know why that place didn't get a good score. So before you, and this is sad, because this was one of my favorite restaurants in San Francisco when I lived there. A 78's really not good. You can know that they had like mice in the kitchen, right? Or they didn't clean up the front room area, right? And what's I think is exciting about this is it's making the data accessible to citizens where they are. Can I tell you a funny side about this? And I know I'm probably going too long. Is the girl I was dating at this point when I was working on this project, we were going out for dinner one night, and we were looking at restaurants, and she's like, hey, Abhi, you want to go to this place? I'm like, sure. She's like, hey, do you notice that Yelp now has restaurant inspection scores in it? And I was like, yeah, what the hell? Have you not listened to anything I've been telling you for the last 4 months? Yeah. I haven't had the best dating life. Okay, so did that with Yelp, and then did a similar thing with Trulia, which is a apartment searching platform around housing inspection data. So basically have your landlord been a good guy, right? The point here being is that there's an opportunity to make all apps more civic, right? And so I know a lot of you guys don't work for government. A lot of you guys don't work for government technology companies. But hopefully for the companies you do work for, you might walk away from this thinking about how could you follow that Yelp example? How could you follow that Trulia example? And use the platforms and the tools that you're building to potentially be more civic, to potentially help more people. All right, now just to close this out, encourage more. This is talking about how to use digital interfaces to get more people to do more things. So this is a picture from Amazon of my favorite book, Tocqueville's Democracy in America. I'm a big nerd, so deal with it. So you guys probably know when you're shopping on Amazon, whenever you're done shopping, it's like, oh, customers who bought this also like these things, right? Same thing at a grocery store. After you get done shopping, there's a bunch of things right in front of you, right? This is known in the commercial industry, as you guys probably know, as the upsell, right? After you buy one thing, can you get people to buy another? So the question I've asked governments is, how can you create civic upsells, right? And what's interesting is, I usually say my friends across the pond, but in our case, it's the friends just west of here in the UK have actually done this. So this is the UK Government Digital Service, which is probably in the world the best digital program for a government ever. They do some really fantastic work. My favorite is this. In their office, they have these like windows, and they cut out a bit of the paper to make sure they remind themselves who the users are at all times. One thing they've done is cool is they've like gone website by website of the old UK government, stripped them down, and rebuilt them into the core gov.uk. It's just freaking awesome. So one interesting thing they did is they took this website called Renewing a Tax Disc, which I don't really know what that means. I think it's called paying your taxes, but whatever. They took this, which apparently most people in the UK have to do. And what they did is after it, they added this. Please join the organ donor registry. They just asked people, when they're done with that, can you do something else? So they built an upsell. But here's what's even cooler about it. They A/B tested it, right? So they tested different ways to build that page to get more people to use it. And at the end, one link got 350,000 more people registered to donate their organs. So literally life-saving technology that's as simple as adding a link and doing some simple testing. So to me, that's showing that governments are changing, right? Their architectures are changing. They're becoming more participatory. They're becoming more responsive, just like the web, which I think is cool and is that should be. This is a quote from Dave Weinberger. Has anyone read Small Pieces Loosely Joined? It's kind of a definitive work on how the web affects human nature in our society. He said this. He said, there is, I believe, something more pulling us onto the web. The web is ours, a world that we are building for ourselves. A world that we are building for ourselves. That's how he described the web. And I think in a certain way, that's what government is too, right? It's what we're building for ourselves, at least in a democracy. And this is, when I worked at Code for America, the first thing I ever designed. Anyone here good at reading binary? Really? Now I'm disappointed. Because I learned how to read Hebrew while I've been here over the last 2 days. You think I'm kidding? I'm totally kidding. So this is binary, and James Madison was the author of the US Constitution, and this is the preamble to the US Constitution, which reads, "We the people, in order to form a more perfect union." And I describe him here as a system architect, because that's the way I think about what he was doing as an engineer myself. He was architecting a system that was participatory. That's what our government is. It is a system that should be fundamentally participatory. So I would say, just like Google would tell us that the web is what we make of it, that government too is what we make of it. Thank you.
Engineering output. Pressure is what makes change in the system. A system that is working stays the same status quo until you apply pressure to it. What is the pressure that government is feeling that is driving it?
Yeah, so the question, if you guys didn't hear, is the forcing function for change in most systems is pressure, and what's the pressure that governments are feeling to cause to make change? So as someone who's worked in government, it's impossible to deny that there's pressure everywhere, primarily from two different fronts. First, that there's not enough money to do everything that we want to do. There just isn't. And second, and this is why I think it's good that people are starting to expect more from government, is that we're used to something different. Like, I can't tell you the number of times people would call me and be like, Abhi, I want to do this thing, but you don't have a website for it, right? Abhi, I want to do this thing, but you don't give me the data for it, right? And I'm not the only one. Like, I was the guy who, like, the mayor and the deputy mayors would be like, okay, Abhi, you have to deal with all these emails now, right? So there is pressure coming on, and frankly, one thing, again, if you're not going to go work for government or for a GovTech company, one thing you should do is apply more pressure to that system. Because, again, I think there is real incentive for cities to change. Part of the reason I think a lot of cities are interested in smart technologies or smart city technologies, open data, and things like that is because it does save money and make them more efficient, because they do have that pressure around financial concerns. But there also needs to be citizen pressure as well.
I want to get back to the mayor example. What did he do with the visualization? It was nice to see, but what did he do with it?
With the dashboard? Yeah, that's a great question. So he would actually use it almost 3 or 4 times a day while A, meeting with other staffers, like other department leaders to ask them questions. B, while meeting with like reporters to answer their questions. But more importantly, what we ended up really using that for is we had a program in city government called performance management, where every week this mayor would meet with a different set of departments to look at their data and ask them how they're doing. And in the past, we didn't actually have data to look at, right? We had that shitty piece of paper. And frankly, we didn't even have that because I didn't know it existed. So now we literally projected that on the screen and used that to talk about it.
Any other questions?
So the question he asked is, did I have any influence, and I'll just generalize it, is like, what role do governments have in changing the way they collect the data, or is it mostly just affecting the way it's published? So I'll say the general way in which governments are changing the way they collect data is by migrating from old, terrible technology into new, better technology that provides better data. And that's a good process that's happening. Frankly, for the stuff that's there currently, we would just write scripts and script after script after script to clean it up. We did some interesting stuff to dedupe it, to normalize it, things like that. But in terms of collecting it differently, we had over 350 different applications within the city of Los Angeles that we used. And to replace each and every single one of them at once would have been next to impossible. So we just took a one-by-one approach to slowly but surely change them from legacy to SaaS. Well, I mean, so what kind of data are you thinking about? Yeah, so that's a good question. So one thing that we didn't do this as, so the question he's asking, like, is there other ways that the community can help collect data better, right? As like a, so that's a good point. So what I was describing is more enterprise-wide data. One thing that cities have done, and we did this a little bit in LA, I'll give you an example, but is engage citizens to help crowdsource data collection. Right? So in St. Louis, my hometown, we did this to capture all the vacant housing throughout the city. Like, the city didn't have a database for that, so we organized a pool of volunteers and had them go around the city and literally map out all the places where they saw vacant housing. We built a simple little smartphone, like not a smartphone app, but a web native, responsive website. I've been talking for way too long. Responsive website where they could give us that data. And that worked, right? And a lot, like there's a great program in Detroit that's done this. It's called Loveland, Detroit. So that's a huge thing that cities do rely on. I'll be honest there, that's usually an augment and a supplement to what cities are doing. The big challenge that really needs to be undertaken is replacing the legacy systems that the cities have.
Any more questions? Yeah.
From your experience, what is the difference between large cities and small towns or cities? Because you might think that like they might not have the legacy issue and are able to move faster, but they probably don't have resources. So what do you see?
Sure. So the question is, what's the difference between large cities and small cities? Do they have the similar problems around legacy technology and things like that? So put simply, almost every city in the US that I've worked with has legacy systems problems. Because of a couple of things that's happened, basically the recession caused a hiring freeze for most places, so they stopped hiring new talent. And because the market got dominated by a bunch of legacy vendors in the late 90s, what my friend, the old CIO of the US government, called the IT cartel. Basically, the whole market's dominated by like 5 or 6 old players. I will say one interesting difference is smaller cities, you tend to see their technology, legacy still, usually like on-premise old stuff, built and maintained by regional companies. So like mom and pop software shops that have built it and maintained it there. Where larger cities like in LA, we don't have as much of that. It's usually larger companies like an Oracle vendor or a Deloitte, right? The other thing I'll just say is smaller cities can be more nimble, though, on adopting software as a service opportunities, which I think is a huge opportunity for government technology companies.
Other questions? Yeah, in the back.
Do you measure or analyze the way that open data is being used, the data that you publish? Is it using effects? Is it used by users, not by internal users, but actual citizens? Is it really open data or just the beautiful money that's happened, or is it like a lively marketplace of data? How do you know what's going on?
He just wanted to tell me that my open data portal was beautiful. No, his question, it's a great one, is how do you analyze or assess how open data is being used, particularly by citizens, not just government officials? Is that right? Yeah. So it's a fantastic question. So there's kind of the obvious ways to look at that, right? Which is kind of how you look at how any web application is being used, right? Users, time on site, et cetera, right? Which I'll say, by the way, like when we made that redesign, and I'm just being honest, like there are big differences that happen when you do things like that. Like we went from a 55% bounce rate to 5, went from 200 visitors a month to 2,500 visitors a month. The harder question is how you track what's being built with the data, right? Because there's no like, you can't add like an analytics token to data, right? There's no way to add something like that to it. You basically just have to hope that people will tell you. So that's a really tough thing, which is where I come back to like the community piece is the only way to really assess that. Like what we did in LA is we built like a Tumblr where people should like tell us what they built, so we'll like showcase it. And then we had a whole bunch of events where people would like go up and demo what they've done. But that's in no way rigorous, right? Some people, I know the World Bank has done this and a couple of foundations have done this, have attempted rigorous studies on this. But again, I think just the complexity of assessing where data goes and what's happened to it is really hard. So I'm not sure how you can trust it that much.
Last 2 questions.
Okay.
So, yeah, in the back.
Well, I would like to ask about the other side, the government, and the efficacy of all those new technologies on how actually policy is changing due to these, new uses in data collection, open data, transparency, etc. And I think one of the main differences between the technology sector and government sector is the life cycle and the speed change actually taking place. And certain things are very easy to send the trash truck there and I pick up the trash. Other aspects, like really heavy policy, planning policy, transportation, take ages.
Yeah.
How do you how can you show actual change? How you can measure efficacy of new technologies, transparency, and all those very positive things? There's this huge gap inherent.
Yeah. So he's asking, how do you assess the impact and efficacy of new technologies in changing policy inside government? Is that fair? Yeah. Well, okay. Sorry, I kind of simplified it, but yeah. Yeah. Well, I used to run when I was at Coach America. We had, we were foundation funded, so we had to do metrics, right? So this was a question I got asked literally every day, right? We were a $15 million organization, so I had dozens and dozens of foundations asking me that question. What we decided on there, and I think this isn't answering your question directly, but I'll just tell you how we decided it then. And this was 4 years ago, right, or 5 years ago, was the main way we would assess impact of new technology was whether or not we were changing the skills and jobs within government, right? So if a new technology was deployed inside government and people liked it enough, then ideally, or theoretically, it would make sense that government would want to hire more people who understand technology, right? That was our thesis. And turned out that actually was true. Like, over the course of 4 years, we had 55 new people hired into government in senior roles. I was one of them. So that happened. Now it's a little bit more tricky, right? Because you're now beyond just the hiring people stage, right? Now it's about how are you actually influencing policy and how you're influencing service delivery, right? So the latter's easier, because if you're building tools, like some companies I work with, like help people enroll in social services, that's an easier thing to track, right? I'll be honest, man, I don't have an answer for you on the policy thing, because it is tough. And also, I don't think there's a one-to-one mapping you can do, right? It's a multifaceted problem. Not problem, it's a multifaceted challenge. Lots of factors go into it, and I would never want to take credit for changing the way a city did transportation by building a better GTFS app. That's just be arrogant of me. So.
Last question.
I was gonna say in the back. Yeah. We can talk after.
Has open data actually worked against its citizens, or you have an example where it could work against its citizens?
That's a good question. It's funny, when I was doing some research before this yesterday, so I'm usually the open data cheerleader, so I try not to have those answers. But I will say two ways it's had. So one, there's been a case, and again, give me your card afterwards and I'll send it to you. There's been a case where open data has given prosecutors in a criminal case in the US wrong information in prosecuting a potential criminal because the city just published the wrong information. But I will say this isn't open data necessarily. This is a more personal example I can give you where I saw something bad happen from it. Not bad, but politically bad happen from it, which was, so when I was in LA, we published all of the street cleaning data, so where we would go around and clean the streets and when we did it. And that was on our open data portal. But to get back to your point, only 10,000 people a month went to it. So not that many in a city of 4 million. So the LA Times didn't apparently go to it that often. LA Times is the main newspaper in Los Angeles. And then they decided to write a story about where we're cleaning the streets. Instead of looking at our data portal, they decided just to email someone in the city asking for that information. That person hadn't looked at the data portal, went ahead and just sent them whatever CSV file, Excel file they had on their computer. And then the LA Times wrote a story, and there was literally protests in the streets that the city government was being fair to the poor neighborhoods within the city. Even though we were being, if you looked at the map that I was publishing, or the actual government was publishing, but just the crappy map that they were publishing didn't include it. So it's just, maybe that's not how open data is negative, but just bad data can be bad. All right, well, that's all the time I think we've got for tonight.
Thank you, Abhi. Thank you so much, Abhi. Thank you, Noga and i3 Equity Partners for buying us beer tonight. And thank you, everybody, for coming. I hope you have a great evening.